Hello everyone. First of all, please accept my apologies for not being able to attend the class due to a flight conflict and change in flight schedule. Right now it's almost 5 a.m. in the morning and I am at Heathrow Airport, and unfortunately I have to stay at Heathrow for about 20 hours. They told me the earliest flight that I could get is going to be arriving to Toronto at 8 p.m. on Monday. So I will miss the class. So I decided to videotape my presentation, and if you are kind enough to watch this and accept this video. If it is necessary, of course, I am able to present this in person as well. My presentation is on one of the greatest mathematicians of the current time. Now, why do I say greatest mathematician? Because well, first of all, he's quite of a character. He is this French guy, crazy French guy with long hair, and he wears a bow, and he always has a spider pin on his chest. But this person, he won the Fields Medal in 2010. We all know that's a huge title for somebody to win Fields Medal. However, what makes me really interested in Cedric is his book, the book that he wrote, The Birth of Theorem. The Birth of Theorem is about how Cedric developed a theorem to prove nonlinear Landau damping, which has application in plasma physics. Now, I do not really know much about physics, and at first when I tried to read his book, I tried my best to follow every concept that he's talking about. For example, Boltzmann equation. I went online, I searched what was Boltzmann equation, and I was trying to follow what he is doing with the Boltzmann equation, what is the problem exactly that he is having and he's working on, and then how he relates this to other problems. But then I got lost and I got really disappointed with the book at that point. I was planning to change my book until I arrived to one of Cedric's videos, which he is talking about his books, and in that video he says that Birth of Theorem should not be mathematically read. It's a book for everyone. Everybody, not only mathematicians can read, but everybody can read this book and understand what a mathematician goes through to develop a theorem.
If the reader starts thinking, what does it mean, Boltzmann equation, this or that, there will be some loss in the audience. Some people will become lost. So let's make sure that they don't try to understand the mathematical concept. No explanation, but insist on the facts, on what happened, the atmosphere and the feelings and the emotions, and also the environment.
I really appreciate this book because as a teacher, we always tell our students, for example, Pythagoras proved Pythagorean theorem. And then the student says, okay, so what? Somebody developed a theorem or somebody came up with something and now we have to remember or memorize it. We barely talk about what it really means when somebody publishes a theorem. What stages do they go through? How long does it take? What are the communication behind that theorem? We barely talk about the life of mathematician until he develops a theory. So that's where Cedric comes. Cedric, he came up with this idea to talk about his experience until the time from 2008 until the time when he developed a theorem to prove Landau damping. He starts his book with talking about how he and his former student, which is now his colleague, they are working on some certain problem which is related to Boltzmann equation. They are working on unconditional regularity of homogeneous Boltzmann equation and collision of gas and the particles. Then while they are working together, they have to revisit some other theorems and some other papers that they have read, and they talk about these theories and sometimes the life of those mathematicians. Basically, what I found is through chapter 1 until chapter 6, Cedric spends on introducing some of the most important figures who he had conversation with or who he has studied their work, and somehow, however, those impacted his thinking or his approach to the problem. Starting from chapter 6, this book becomes a collection of email conversations that shows what has been communicated between Cedric and his former student, Justin Clement, and other colleagues. He spends, from chapter 6 on, he spends more of his book on telling us the communications that has been going around between him and other mathematicians, or not necessarily mathematicians, other people who still his communication with somehow impacted his thinking on developing a theorem. According to him, communication is a great tool for any mathematician when they are trying to solve a solution or to come up with a theorem or to prove a theorem. In this book, Cedric talks about his experience. He tells us many interesting things that he has done, and it is really interesting how some little details, for example, music, how music changes his thinking, how the lyrics in that music changes his thinking and helps him to come up with something that is related to his theorem. How when he visits somebody, how his conversation with even a taxi helps him to get to helps him somehow in this part of the theorem. So these are very interesting. These were very interesting. Also, he talks about how at some point he gets frustrated because he keeps on making mistakes. He thinks that he got the solution, but then when he reviews it or shows it to somebody else, he understands his problems, and that is very frustrating for him. And he talks about all these mistakes and frustration as a normal process of a mathematician life towards making a theorem or working on a problem. In 2009, he finishes his proof with the help of his colleague, and in 2010, after submitting his paper, he gets a call from the president of Mathematical International Union in Budapest, and they inform him that you have won the title of the winner of Fields Medal. Of course, he becomes very happy. He shares with us his emotion and his experiences on how he, from the time that he gets the call until the time that he goes on the stage and receives the award. And he also tells us how he felt right after as well, until his paper was published. He summarizes his book somehow and tells us a mathematician at first is in a dark. He is in a dark place, and he knows that there is something there remaining to be proved. So it's something that is waiting to be discovered. And then after a glimmer, a little light will open up, and then becomes a broader daylight. And then once a mathematician sees this light, they gain confidence, and they feel that they want to tell the whole world about the things that a mathematician they find. And then after that, they go back to a sort of a depression, because then they keep on thinking, okay, now what? Now that they found this, what is the next step for them? Or some other thoughts that Cedric shares with us. For example, what if there is a problem in his work? It's not being discovered what that problem is yet. He tells us in his book that like all these thoughts sometimes also motivated him to commit a suicide, and if it wasn't because of his daughter, he could have suicided. So I really like the book because it talks about the stages that a mathematician goes through. Let me finish my presentation with one of the quotes that Cedric has written in his book, and I really like this quote. He says, "A mathematician is a blind man in a dark room looking for a black cat that isn't there." This sounds really interesting to me, and thank you for listening to my presentation.